Awesome.
There we are.
Nice. Hey, kings and queens, I'm Euwarnii Hughes. I'm the CEO of Great Gale LLC, as well as the author and illustrator of Afrofuturism manga, Bold Saga. And joining me today, I have...
Oh, should we go ahead?
Yeah.
Okay, my bad. Hi, everybody. This is Beserat Debebe from Edan Comics. I am the founder of Edan Comics and the writer of Jemba and Howie. We are a Pan African entertainment company that publishes African graphic novels and uses African graphic novels to bring African stories to life. So that's a little bit about me.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay.
I think he's frozen.
I'm just waiting for him to come back. Can you hear us? All right. C3, can you hear us? Okay. All right.
Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you now.
Yeah.
We can
Great,
hear
great.
you.
Okay. So, my name is Cthree. I'm from Los Angeles, California. I have a company called Anime and Hip Hop, where we fuse animations, uh, and hip hop together, and comic books, video games, and basically we are, basically it's an art that's been together for a long time, but they just never and that's basically was the
Okay, no problem. And that's amazing. That's amazing. Okay, so I'm just going to share my screen so we can get into it. Give
let's
me one
go.
second. Okay, sharing the screen. Actually, you know what? Share this window. Okay, perfect. All right. Hey, production, can you please pull up my PDF? All right. And can everyone see this?
Yeah.
Yes.
Awesome, awesome. So again, today, thank you for everyone joining. This is again Fawohodie, Black Art Emancipated. So independence, freedom, emancipation. These are the three words that are at the essence of today's discussion. They are the meaning of Fawohodie. And what is Fawohodie? Well, Fawohodie is an Adinkra, and that's an aphorism that represents a concept and a truth. It's the symbol of independence, freedom, and emancipation. And honestly, it's one of my favorite Adinkras. The full expression is, and bear with me, Fawohodie ene obre na enam. This literally translates to independence comes with its responsibilities. And the connection of how it ties into today is that this means that as creatives in the indie, mainstream markets of comics and manga, we have a responsibility. That as we create works of fiction, worlds to escape the stress of life, we owe it to our readers and to ourselves to provide a sense of freedom, of independence, of emancipation. Because if life is already so much stress and so much anxiety, you don't want to multiply it with the work that you create. You want to alleviate it. And why is this so vital? Because generations ago, and we understand that today again is Juneteenth, generations ago, and even today we face ideologies which attempt to limit us, which attempt to put us in a box and constrain who we are, to demean us in the real world as well as in fiction. So as creatives, we need to rewrite the narrative, not just waiting on others, but to take action ourselves. So the first example of comics embodying Fawohodie is Tuskegee Airs. Their story takes the spirit of the Tuskegee Airmen and infuses it into the present via Afrofuturism, partial manga aesthetic, and immersed in history. In fact, they were one of the first comics ever backed on Kickstarter, and I have never regretted it. It's a truly amazing story. The next comic that embodies Fawohodie is Alchemist. This story combines action with sci-fi and Afrofuturism aesthetic, but at its core, it's liberating to showcase the main character is Black, has agency, and is in the future. And the next comic that embodies Fawohodie is Black Sands. It's a story that instills a respectable pride in our young kings, our kids and our sons and daughters, reminding them that they are kings, that they are queens, and they come from a legacy of timeless greatness. And then from the comics, we go into manga. Onyan Kapon. This example came as a surprise in Attack on Titan. Onyan Kapon showcases authentic depiction of a black teen, wasn't marginalized, and had his name, which is part of an Adinkra. I'm going to attempt this one. Onyan Kapon Adom Nti Biri Biari. Ye, meaning by God's grace, all will be well. And that's so amazing because in manga, I know it's better in American comics, but in manga, we don't always get authentic representation of black characters. So to see someone take the time to actually do it, this is a step in the right direction. And lastly, Kuzan, who is one of my favorite examples found in the manga One Piece. He is a black man who is tall but isn't portrayed as the brute stereotype, multifaceted, with compassion and a strong sense of justice. Leaving a legacy. For to be free is not merely to cast off one's chains, but to live in a way that respects and enhances the freedom of others. Nelson Mandela. And speaking of freedom, let's continue with how each of us are embodying Fawohodie with our own Black art. Okay, there we go. Okay, so the first question I would like to ask is, how are each of, well, first of all, what story have you created and what inspired you?
Okay, I'll go first. So the story that I created, I actually bring it out right here. It's called Spirit Language, and Spirit Language, even just the name, came from the Medu Nature, and basically it was my own translation. This book, along with The Alchemist, which has a lot of African Moorish overtones, you know, is was the fusion of this. So literature, actual literature, and comic book, other comic books and things like that. So like the Yu Yu Hakusho was one of my favorite animes growing up, and I found Shonen Jump. So Shonen Jump pretty much put me on to the out. It was a couple of books that changed my life. Of African Consciousness. It was by Amos Wilson. Uh, he came with some terms that shocked my brain and made me, So that, because the thing is, I'm from the West Coast. So the thing is about the West Coast is our cultural differences is we created a slavery culture. You know what I mean? A slavery that was a culture that was based off slavery and like making things work, right? Um, but the thing is that we were disconnected from the process, from the history. So you can see or understand why uh, uh, the mental health issues are what it is. And so what I wanted to do personally was embody that, and change the representation not only in comics but creating an album and a video game that served as transmedia for the project to be pushed forward, and us to be represented in not only comics but games, where we're only represented in about 10%, if not every sports game there is, and no role playing games, no fantasy games for black entrepreneurs. And that's one thing I want to be able to embody, but not only that, but move a spiritual foundation with it.
How about you, Beserat?
Awesome. That was great. Our stories are, we have two stories so far. One of them is called Jember, and the other one is Hawi. This is Jember right here. And then we have this one. This is Hawi. And we center most of our stories on, they're inspired by East African history and mythology. I'm Ethiopian. I came to the States when I was around 14, 15 years old. And so there's been, I grew up with a lot of animation and animated stories and comics. And, this has been an area that's been missing our culture, our heritage, and our stories. And so we've been, ever since around 2018 is when we first started working on these books, and they've gone really well, got really good reception. Our stories, for example, Jember is about a character that lives in Ethiopia in Addis Ababa and goes through just the typical day-to-day lives of a person living in Ethiopia, and how his battle with questions of self-worth and self-confidence are tested because of the different circumstances that are in the country. Howie is more of a first-gen immigrant story, and it deals with themes of identity and defining yourself, embracing your own power within. And so these two are the kind of the stories we have right now. And as I said, our team is a Pan-African team, and our hope is to use this platform to tell more African stories that have not been given the limelight and the shine, and to preserve our heritage through these stories and through these graphic novels.
Nice, nice. That is incredible. I loved hearing both of that. Well, the way how I got into making Bold Saga, what really inspired me was watching a lot of One Piece growing up. But what I always wanted to see was authentic representation when it came to Black characters. So instead of waiting for it, I actually made Bold Saga, and it's an Afrofuturism manga that empowers our young kings and queens with the majesty of African culture. All throughout Bold Saga, there are Adinkras. That's why I even have this hat that has the right there, Fawohodie on the back. Right there again is Fawohodie, and on chapter 2 is Fawohodie as well. I don't know if you can see it as close because of the light. But the point is, all throughout the story, I wanted to show that in manga, we want to honor African culture, showcase the majesty of it. I'm from Antigua, so even in the stories, when it comes to manga, there's even less representation of Caribbean people. You get a starfish with a Rastaman hat. So it's ridiculous. That's what they think of us. So that's why in chapter 2 of Bold Saga, they have people who are actually speaking Antiguan dialect. I actually had to check with my family to make sure it's authentic as well, because representation matters. What you show someone else matters. And I feel that that's truly what inspires, what takes us all higher, and what truly allows us to access that Fawohodie with our creations. So that brings me to the next question, which is, give me 1 second. How does your story embody Fawohodie?
Okay. Yeah. So from my understanding, the definition is to not only gain freedom, but understand the process that comes with freedom. So so you actually taking it on and creating the correct foundation to continue, the process. So I would say me personally, it would be, I use symbology, period.
Hey
Like,
everyone.
what's the deal?
Sorry, I'm late.
Sounds good.
Wasn't
Yeah,
working on my laptop, so now I'm using my phone.
yeah, it's all good.
Welcome.
Yes, but basically, creating a history and creating something that they can actually tap into experience wise. You feel me? Because I feel like if you don't know what to do, you only gonna, you know what I mean, kind of, you're gonna create a format for yourself. But if you can tap in, somebody went through it already, then it makes it easier for your process. You know what I mean? Um, so what I did in my story was to create characters who resembled people like from the states. You know what I mean? From the African diaspora, the ones who've been replaced from one place to the other, and the effects of that. You feel me? Because mentally, they could feel out of place, and I wanted as an artist to make people relate and okay with connecting back.
That's amazing. And Lena, the question we were asking before you joined was, what story have you created and what inspired you?
Um, the story I created, of course, is Afro Demons because that was my first time writing it by myself. My first title was, another. Well, I can't say it because it's Unity, but Afro Demons was something that I wrote because it represent me. I have natural hair. It represent other women, Black women in the community, and younger generation to come. So I put my all into Afro Demons.
Awesome. And how does your story embody Fawohodie?
What's that?
How does your story embody Fawohodie? Basically, Fawohodie is an Adinkra that symbolizes emancipation and freedom and independence. So how does your story showcase that or embody that?
Well, in issue two, Keisha goes to UCLA, and at the time in the 70s, they were fighting for equal rights. So I incorporated that in issue two, how she had to fight for her equality for being a Black student at UCLA. So that's how I put that in there.
That's great. And how about you, Beserat?
So I think more than the story, I loved what everybody said here. And as far as the emancipation of Black art, I think that just by existing in this field, each of us are embodying that, because that representation has been missing, is still missing. The overwhelming content out there is not something that supports the Black identity, the African diaspora identity. And so just by default, I think that's one idea of emancipation. I think another level for us is, one of the things we specifically focus on and we do is in defining a new form of art style and a new book, a new genre of art. Like just like how the U.S. have Europe, and the U.S. and Europe have graphic novels and comic books. The Japanese have manga. Ethiopian visual storytelling heritage is very rich, and we've been doing visual storytelling since early 17th century. And this is similar to other African nations. There's so much rich history in visual storytelling. We don't always have to seek validation from manga and from comic book formats and arts and storytelling. We can and we are creating our own genre, our own field, and we call them sensiils. It's a combination of two words. Sensiil means chained art or sequential art, and it draws from that rich heritage we have. And I always encourage, fellow Black artists, fellow African artists, to dive deeper into those heritages we have and bring them forward so that we have more authentic and original representation. I think that is true emancipation of Black art. It's when we can take ownership of our rich heritage and
There you
apply
go.
it and fit it into the stories we want to tell, and not just adapt and pick what others are doing, kind of put representative characters using those art styles. You know, that's a good thing. I'm not detracting from that at all. It definitely furthers our movement, but the true emancipation is in ownership, right? That's what I believe in, and that's what we embody, and that's what we try to create with our stories.
Exactly. I totally agree. And I feel that makes sense because I've had discussions with people where they tell me that you're black, you can't make manga because manga is for the Japanese people, or American comics are for America and all that other stuff. That's why when I created my story, I make sure the first word I always tell people is Afrofuturism. Because even if you look at the very essence, the core of it, it's about celebrating the majesty of Black culture, from what the characters look like to the languages. It took me 2 years to get chapter one done because I had to do research how to actually pronounce Osa, different clicks, different words, actually making sure the African martial arts in it, like Musango and Nguni, stick fighting, Golo, all of that is in it. So the story is rich. There's a tapestry, something that you can feel. So not only is there the beauty of the actual, then there's the actual meaning of the Adinkra all throughout the story. Then there's the actual language actually being spoken. Because manga, and from what I've experienced in all my life, it's all about culture. Yet they hardly ever show Black culture. So instead of waiting, as you mentioned, Beserat, instead of waiting for what they have and looking for validation, we need to create our own. But at the same time, one of the best things that we can do is, it's a theory called the Mexican pizza, where you take like two things and put it together. Because manga, when it really got big, um, Osamu Tezuka, he was inspired by Disney, the big eyes. I even looked at some of your page, and the Sensi eel, the
Yeah.
eyes, big and very illustrious. So, there's the cultural diffusion. We learn from each other, but at the same time, nothing is ever created in a vacuum. We learn from each other, and we're supposed to propel and lift all of us up. And that's what we have as a responsibility with our art, to embody that Fawohodie. That
Yeah.
brings me to the next question. What was the hardest part of creating your story?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so it was illustrated by one of my good friends. His name is Aaron Johnson, and he did X-Men and like countless other independent projects away from X-Men, of course. But basically the illustrations, the process of the illustrations, it would take weeks, maybe a week for one page. You know what I mean? So actually, the process, the story was one thing. It was already its own journey within itself. But um, after that, the illustrations, that was a pretty tough thing. Um, and actually understanding the different cultures. Now, what I did here, which is part of the emancipation of what we're doing, is I always had this problem with time and geographical location where I didn't understand how people never implemented or uses it. You know what I mean? Geographical location and time. They usually don't use the two, right? But like that was key with me is the timeline. So what I wanted to do personally was mix cultures and make energies, right? Because what people get hung up on is the actual program, right? And I'm a rebel, like at heart. So what I did was mix Medu cultures, now valley civilizations, and I had to really study them and said I got my own warriors. I just recently did my first Orisha ritual where I got, I got my warrior, and that was a very intense moment. It was very intense, but getting back to the culture, doing it yourself, you know what I mean, and making it a spiritual cultivation at the same time. I wouldn't say hard, but it was challenging.
All right. How about you, Besarat?
So just to repeat back, I think the question was,
What
what
was
was
the
the
hardest part of you creating your story?
okay, yeah. So as a writer, I'm not an illustrator. I draw, but I don't do the illustration or books. For me, always writing the story, the creation of the story, and making something that's quality storytelling is the hardest part. It's always, coming up with characters and, you know ideas are a dime a dozen. I feel it's always the challenge is picking the right one and then digging deeper and really understanding the core themes of your story and trying to put that down. I think that's very challenging because it has to come from such an authentic place to be quality. And that's what I find the hardest. And as far as like incorporating black art and black storytelling, um, I think that, the maintaining quality has to be such a number one priority for all of us, because without the consistent quality of output that we provide, then people won't take us seriously. Won't we will not able we will not be able to cement our kind of art and our storytelling and carve our own table, without that quality. So it's really that for me. It's the continual editing and deep kind of analogy of thinking about the story and shutting out other ideas and focusing. That's the hard part. That's the challenging part of writing stories.
Definitely, I understand. And how about you? Lina? What was the hardest part of creating Afro Demons?
I think the hardest part for me is going over it after I was done writing it, making sure it makes sense because I'm a woman that write comics, so I want to make sure I my story fits in with probably other black storytellers. Make sure there's enough action. Make sure there's enough dialogue. Make sure that the plot and everything makes sense. So I think that's also was um, the challenge for me. That was the challenge for me
I
for writing
definitely.
Afro Demons.
Definitely. For me, if I haven't mentioned it, or if you don't know, I am the writer and the artist for my series, Bold Saga.
Mhm.
So finishing the chapters was the hardest part, mainly because what I was going for didn't already exist, and my concern was that if I hire an artist, knowing how Black people are portrayed in manga, I felt it might end up either stereotyped, marginalized, or they may not take enough time to actually authentically replicate what the hair texture looks like, what the nose looks like, and even in the story when it comes to angels, because in Bold Saga, even on the cover of chapter one, there's a black angel, because we need to see that. We need black supernatural beings as well, not just everything's white. So we need to see a rewriting of the narrative. So actually finishing the story was hard because in the process of it, life hit me in the face like 4 times. I felt like quitting so many times. I felt like giving up. COVID happened because I released Bolt Saga last year. My grandfather died. I had to go to the Caribbean while working on his funeral arrangements. Like almost every like worst case scenario I thought could happen, but I chose not to give up. So I embody that into the story. That's why Bolt Saga stands for Brave Onwards, Limit Destroyer. So the hardest part actually finishing what I said, which is what I wanted to do, create a story. So that brings me on to the next question. What are the parallels between Juneteenth, Fawohodie, and your story?
Juneteenth, Fawohodie, and my story. I would say like really, just to reiterate it is, just to jump off the falsification of African consciousness. Like you take one's history, you take their soul, and that is the epitome of the movement of like where we are right now and how it parallels. I feel like it's very important because when we bring up that statement, we have to figure out how to educate ourselves now because we know that we're not getting the right education, but how do we represent that? What I mean? Because comic books, to be honest with you, like I've always seen it as a lost art. Comic books aren't something everybody's reading or everybody's doing. It's something you got to be let me say a special unique person. You know, so what we're doing is trying to revitalize something that's already not in the mainstream world. I feel like that's emancipation. That's changing the narrative within itself, and then on top of that, are pushing our culture. You know what I mean? So I think this is a revolutionary time for us right now. We're like the fucking, you know what I mean? Like we're the knights that's moving this forward. Yeah.
Definitely.
So I would say what parallels my story is um, regaining or the the recollection of history.
Awesome, awesome. How about you, Beserat?
For me, I guess so. The spirit of Juneteenth and Fawohodie is, I think, in emancipation. And I was recently posting about this about Brother Malcolm X comment in the video about how the only hope for the black man in America is in a strong Africa. And I really, that hits home for me because the two perils of the struggles of emancipation and the struggles of African people in Africa is they have to go together. And so by bringing forth African storytelling and changing the mindsets of African people, empowering African people, African storytellers. That's what we do. That's what our platform stands for. And by just by creating these stories, right? And all our stories are created by a full African team. When you hold the books and you see the quality of the stories and the art, I want you to recognize this was done fully by an African team, and it shows the capabilities of an African creator. Um, that by itself is self-reliance. It's a strong Africa, and so I think that is where I see the themes of true emancipation, true storytelling, owning our space, owning our stories, owning our art, or owning our heritage. Those are the parallels for me that I see.
Okay, awesome. And how about you, Lina?
For me, my story is parallel to Juneteenth and what was that again? I'm sorry. Juneteenth.
Oh, how does your story parallel Juneteenth and Fawohodie?
Fawohodie. Am I saying it right? Fawohodie.
Fawohodie. It's
It's
okay.
tongue twisted.
I'm not even gonna judge because like me
Yes.
just comprehending it's a challenge, but it's
It parallels because Afro demons represent us and it represents Black culture and everything Black people stands for. So that's how my story is parallel to Juneteenth and everything else. Because Afro demons is also a time capsule that takes place back in the 70s. So everything that happened in the 70s, Keisha is just there to make sure her Black people is straight, is good, instead of I don't want her to perceive as if someone asks is Afro demons is like mixed in with Satan. I'm like, no, this is I guess because the demon ending, they don't really get it, but no, it's nothing like that. So I just want Afro demons to really represent us for the Black culture in itself.
Yeah, that
yes,
covered magic, bro.
Yes.
I really understand that. It's really about representation. That's what truly matters.
Yes.
Not just about diversity for diversity's sake.
No.
Such a character to get more dollars. The main goal of it all is representation, and how both saga parallels Juneteenth and Fawohodie is all of them come around the same aspect of shattering chains, of shattering limits, of true freedom. And as you mentioned, yes, you want to own the lake, you want to own what you're doing, not just trying to stay confined in it. And where it ties in again is what Masego goes through. He wants to reach a certain goal to become the next Anansi like his role model Shaka Zulu. But for 4 years, he's gone through failure in public. His parents don't believe in him. His co-workers don't like him. Like everything is against him, but he doesn't lose hope of his goal. And I tie that, and I feel it ties into Juneteenth again because the perseverance of Black people to go through no matter what life has thrown at us culturally. You look throughout history, always find a way to prevail, turning pain into power. I find that so remarkable. I find the staying power of Black people something that needs to be cherished and celebrated. And that's something that I've infused into Bold Saga. Because someone just recently asked, why do you hate the character? Why does he go through things? Because Black people go through things. And if you're Black, you should see a story where the character doesn't have it easy. They face life, but then they overcome. They find a way to keep going. That is truly paramount. That is something that we need to see celebrated, represented, and that's how I feel all of that ties in. So, what advice do you have for upcoming writers and creators?
I would say perseverance. Find your language. Find the way that the universe speaks to you, because that's going to ultimately, determine whether you go against your road or you fall with the primary law, which is synchronicity. And that's what you want to find as an artist is that moment. Every time you want to capsule up that moment. Um, so my advice to artists, period, is just be still. Just find that way that the universe speaks to you. You know what I mean, and max out.
Awesome, awesome. How about you, Beserat?
For me, it's really about, if you're starting out, pace yourself. Start with something small. Don't go for your, you know. I know you probably have this like project that you think is gonna blow up, and it's gonna take 200 pages, and it's gonna be picked up to a movie and all that stuff, and that's great. And I, just I would say when you're starting out, table that and start with something small, with something like 20 pages, 22 pages. You need to build stamina. You need to build your craft so that you can tell your golden story really well. And so yeah, so if you're starting out, just you know, narrow your vision, pick a small project, learn from other people, always stay open minded, and just keep growing, keep working on your projects.
So true. And how about you, Lena?
I would tell future writers and artists is to make sure their vision is clear, make sure they're focused, and it's okay to ask people who are more advanced and bigger dogs than you for advice and for help, and to make sure you know this is what you want and this is what you could accomplish in your project and what you feel like you know is best for you. Don't always listen to what other people say because that might take you down and put weight on you, but just keep going and keep striving to be the best.
Exactly. Aim for number one. Aim to not just be in your lane, but dominate the lane.
Yes.
Advice. I'm sorry, did I cut you off?
No. You're good.
Oh, great. Advice that I would give to upcoming creators, writers is make something cool. I know many times we want to make the next Superman, Batman, whatever already exists, but make something cool. The nuance is that when you make something cool, you know exactly what it is your story is about. You know the breadth, the width, the depth, know what it is, so that when you fully explain your story, you tell it from an angle no one else has seen, no one else has even thought about. That way you make something unique, not just another carbon copy of something else. In addition to that, the other advice that I would give you is knowledge is the new money, like Dr. Eric Thomas says, and education is the great equalizer.
Hmm.
When you know and you do research and you have that in a story, that's what makes your story have type of substratum, a type of staying power, so that over time, when people fully get what you're talking about, it's incredible. Like even in my story, even though the story takes place in Awazela, it's based off of an actual African empire. So that is what I wanted to actually put in. I didn't want to just make it based off of just what already currently exists. I wanted to make sure that it's something that you can actually explain in the story, but it's also the back of the book as well. We need to educate as well as entertain. So that brings me to the next question. Where can people find your story?
Okay, so spirit language right here, you can find it at www.thirdeyetribe.com with a three RD tribe.com. Um, it's only there right now until we finally sign, our new distribution deal. But it's also coming with a video game and an album. We got animated music videos that actually parallels the comic book, also. So just to continue the transmedia, we created other parts of it too. But thirdeyetribe.com.
Awesome, awesome. How about you, Beserat?
You can find all of our books at itancomics.com. You can see the spelling of that on my name, ETANCOMICS. That's also our social media handles for Twitter, Instagram, just at ETAN Comics. And we have our Kickstarter campaigns that we usually run. We're a 100% community funded company. We've raised over 60K on Kickstarter, fulfilled all our campaigns, and we continue to do that. I think that having that community funded ownership gives us that the ability to maneuver through any kind of gatekeeping and create original stories for you guys. So follow us. We would love to entertain you for years to come, alongside with Lina and Cthree and Euwarnii.
Yeah.
And we definitely appreciate you coming in today. Thank you.
My off top, bro. I actually can't wait to read your story.
Yeah.
Thank you. Same here.
Definitely.
Well,
All
my
right.
website's supposed to be launching soon, and I can't wait for that. So they could find. Right now, we're trying to push out Kickstarter backers awards. So whoever supported the Kickstarter back in, I believe, March, that's who's going to get the comics first. But till then, the site should be up soon. I say in another month, or probably at the end of the month. And they could find Afro Demons and everything else, shirts, t-shirts, and everything on the website. That's www.bookgirls, girls with a Z at the end, comics.com. So I'm excited for that.
Yeah, let us know about launches and everything.
Yes, and on IG too, Instagram at Dope Girls with the girls with a Z at the end, comics.
Awesome, awesome. Well, you can find us, Great Gale Co., as my name says in the top left. We are on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Clubhouse, Fanbase. And if you want Bold Saga, Chapter 1 and Chapter 2, they're currently available on Amazon, but we're currently hosting a Kickstarter launched today on Juneteenth. And basically, you'll be able to get like this hat, this Fawohodie hat. Dude, so dope. We got notebooks, walk into your purpose, the type of affirmation that young kings and queens need to see. Even the shirt that I'm wearing, it literally says "Rise Up." So we need to be and wear walking affirmations of it. So that's what the merch that I do is about. That's what the business is about empowering our young kings and queens to seize greatness. And again, thank you, Cthree, for joining me, Beserat for joining me, Lina for joining me, and all the kings and queens out there for watching this. I really appreciate it. And next time, keep.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yep.
Yeah, it was a pleasure, bro. It was a pleasure.
Yes. And happy Father's Day to you guys. For those fur fathers.
Father's Day.
Yes.
Thank you, Charisse.
Euwarnii soon.
Definitely.